Okay, wonderful. Welcome everyone to this IES webinar, Nature-Based Solutions for Soil Health. Today we are delighted to be joined by Professor Bridget Emmett, Head of Soils and Land Use at the UK Centre for Ecology and Hydrology. Bridget is also currently a member of the EU Mission for Soil Health and Food. In this webinar, Bridget will provide an overview of various
Thank you for joining. I'm just going to give it a minute so that everyone can join.
And improve ongoing issues such as loss of organic carbon from croplands, soil erosion and compaction in grasslands. As always, there will be the chance for questions at the end of the presentation, so please do submit these in the Q&A option at the bottom of your screen at any point during the presentation, and I will then ask these on your behalf later on. As always, this webinar is being recorded and will be uploaded to the IES YouTube channel. Thank you very much for logging in. It's great to see so many of you here today, and I'll now hand over to Bridget. Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you, Ethne, and hello to everyone. Thanks for having me and asking me. And thanks for your interest in soil. Soil is rather taking off at the moment, which is fantastic for some of us who've been pushing for greater awareness and action for soil health for quite a while now. So thank you for the introduction, and I'll just jump straight in and give you a bit of a background as to why we should take action for soils and what opportunities there are for nature-based solutions. So here we go. Globally, there's a lot of issues on soils, and you can see there Franklin Roosevelt, the Dust Bowl. Actually tragic conditions happened when a nation didn't look after its soil, and there's many issues all around the world about soil. So the question, I suppose, is can we sit back and think, well, not such a problem for the UK, we live in a temperate climate, our soils are relatively stable. But I just want you to point you to the 2016 House of Commons inquiry into soil health. I was the special advisor for this committee, and their results were quite startling. They came up with this phrase that soil is a Cinderella environmental issue, and that despite the many things soils do for us, it basically hasn't had the attention that it should have had, and that other issues such as air quality, water quality and biodiversity has had, either in terms of protection, policy attention, or indeed public interest. And there's a whole series of issues that were highlighted in the inquiry. 11% loss in soil carbon from croplands since 1978, 80 to 90% loss of our peatlands, hotspots of erosion, which is impacting not just on production in our field, but also into our rivers, unknown numbers of contaminated soils, and we don't even know what has happened since 2007, as there's no current national soil monitoring program. So in the last 15 years, we don't actually know whether things have got worse, better, or stayed the same. So UK is no different to the EU. I was involved recently in a summary, a new analysis, if you like, of what is the state of EU soils, and 60 to 70% of EU soils show some indicator of degradation. And that's, again, very similar to what we found in the UK. We've got many, many contaminated sites. There's residual pesticides and contaminants in our farmland. We've got nutrient inputs, which is causing eutrophication. We've got croplands losing carbon, and we've got unsustainable water erosion rates. When we were part of the EU, we're of course now separate. But so hopefully I've shown you that both globally, the UK and in the EU, we've got an issue we need to sort out. And the EU has been so concerned that it's developed what's called a moonshot after Kennedy's moonshot in 1960 to see a man in the moon by the end of the decade and bring him back safely. So these missions or moonshots are things that need a step change. They urgently need action. And you can see that they're quite a mix, from cancer to healthy oceans. And they're so concerned about soil health that it's one of the 5 missions that it's chosen to develop. So that might bring us to what is a healthy soil. So we talk about soil is unhealthy. What does that mean? So there are many definitions, and it is perhaps not so important to discuss all of them. I just want to give you one, which is the continued capacity of soils to support ecosystem services. So this recognizes that we don't just need soil for food production or trees, but they also help water regulation. They're important habitat for a huge number of animals and microbes. They contribute to climate mitigation, and they also protect many of our cultural features if you think of archaeology. So how do we measure it? How do we know that things are bad, and how can people do this for themselves? So whether it's national or within a farm, the basic approach is that you must use the same method continually, otherwise you don't know if it's the method that's changed or the measurement. You basically structure your sampling, so have a rolling program across fields of similar soils and management, or what we do at UKCH, and we run a national rolling monitoring program, we structure according to land class. And then you can take samples. In a field, you might use the RB209 method for fertilizer testing, which is basically walking a field, taking georeference samples in a W, and going down to, if you want to link up to national soil monitoring programs for carbon and things like that, you need to go to 15 centimeters. For fertilizer, it's often 7.5 centimeters. And one of the big things we're trying to ask people to do is not just to do the classic NPK for fertilizer if we're thinking farmland, but to think also of the organic carbon for climate mitigation, to look at the pH, nutrients, yes, but to also look for visual signs of compaction and erosion, to think about the biodiversity. And one of the things people can easily do themselves is earthworms. This is a fantastic initiative at the moment called 30-minute worms. It does what it says in the tin. It takes you 30 minutes to do it in a place. And it might be something that you're just interested in, which is contaminants. There's lots of commercial labs that do these. Many are, you can find links from AHDB, from LEAF, which basically say these labs are good quality. And we're also hoping in England, at least, that DEFRA may commission step-by-step guidance with benchmarks, national benchmarks from our national monitoring programs, so that you can, people who do self-assessment can see, well, am I above the average, below the average? How am I doing compared to everyone else, taking into consideration my soil type, the land use I'm doing, and my climate zone. So what do the results mean? So at the moment, benchmarks, there are some, but essentially you don't really need them. If you track change over time, we all agree, all soils people agree, if you've got an ongoing loss of soil organic carbon, organic matter, it's not a good thing. You need to change what you're doing. If your soil is becoming more acidic, i.e. it's got a lower pH, again, not a good thing. You might want to think of adding lime with your fertilizer. If there's increased evidence of compaction and erosion, again, that isn't great for soils, for plant production, for the animals and microbes that live in the soil. And the nutrients really should map crop needs. And indeed, in England, at least, that's the requirement for water, the new farming rules for water, which require soil testing and evidence that these are matching the crop needs, and therefore excess nutrients aren't going into our water courses and impacting all the habitat and the systems there. So I'm often told, and even on Farming Today, I was asked this, but it's really hard, isn't it, soil monitoring? Well, for someone like me who's responsible for monitoring programs, it isn't just soil, but we also do water and birds and pollinators and plants and what have you. Soils are actually rather well behaved. So birds have a habit of migrating, going off, coming back, changing their paths. Pollinators won't come out in the rain. Water changes its flow and its quality every time it rains. And air pollution masses come across countries. So we used to be terribly generous, giving all our acid plumes to Norway and Scandinavia. So soils generally stay where they are. We know we can georeference them. Some things change quickly and some things change slowly. They are no harder to monitor than anything else in our natural environment. We've just not had the policy pull, and it's been underfunded. There's been no regulation requiring people to do this. So here's the data that we've got from our national monitoring program that we do for Great Britain. We've been doing it since 1978. We report the data both by soil types and land use classes, because land use, or how we're using our soil, tends to determine what the fate of soil quality health is. So other programs have spotted this as well, but in our croplands and arable, we are slowly losing soil carbon year on year. So we've lost 11% of our soil carbon, organic carbon, in arable systems since 1978. Our fertile grasslands seem to be adding a bit to their soil carbon over time. Infertile grasslands quite stable. The upland and habitat systems, conservation land, if you like, have got quite complex systems, but we are quite worried about our heathlands and our bogs, which seem to be going down as well now. So I hope this shows you that we know how to do it. We've been reporting it. This is for carbon. We've got this for many, many other indicators, such as acidity, such as nutrients, such as biodiversity. And I just want to compare. One of the most common things that we do to assess how well we're doing with our farmland and agri-environment schemes is to monitor farmland birds. And here's the trend for farmland bird indicators since the 1970s to 2007. I've just put alongside it the soils data, which I don't think, okay, we've got fewer points because it's been underfunded, but the direction of travel, the clear different directions of change, I think show that it's no different. We can do this if we just have the money to do it. And people can also have a look for themselves on their own land. But I do want to challenge or basically provide you with some information, thinking about COP in 26 in Glasgow, of how much soil can do for us in mitigating or offsetting the greenhouse gas emissions from, say, agriculture. So the greenhouse gas emissions from agriculture on an annual basis is 48 tons per hectare per year. If you look at that loss of carbon from arable, we're actually adding just under 1 to that number, so that's not great. Anything negative means that one of these things along the bottom is capturing carbon, so potentially offsetting this production of greenhouse gas that you can see here. So the size of the bar just tells you the challenge that we have and the opportunity we have. So that small increase in soil carbon in our fertile grasslands barely nibbles at the amount of greenhouse gases that agriculture produces per hectare. The highest number that anyone's found for a fertile grassland, which is a fantastic study in Northern Ireland, is 1.5 tonne per hectare, which again does not offset the 4.8. Woodland, that's both in the tree biomass, because generally that's where nearly all the carbon goes. The soil, there isn't a huge build-up in the soil unless you plant trees in arable soils, which we rarely want to do. You can see the numbers are quite big, but again, just even if you planted 1 hectare of woodland for every hectare of agriculture, you still might not get there. One of the biggest numbers is if we take peat out of agriculture, but that's a huge area of agriculture, a lowland fens in East Anglia, for example, and we just don't have many hectares of it. There's quite a lot, but we can't, if you multiply up by area for Great Britain, it isn't going to do the job. So soils has a role. It's a small role, but it's important for climate mitigation. But there's many, many other reasons why you will want to get organic matter and carbon into your soil, and that is for soil health in the round. If you have organic matter and organic carbon in your soil, it is aerated, it's got good structure, the roots can grow in it, the habitat is great for the animals, you probably don't have compaction. There's just so many reasons to have soil carbon and organic matter in your soil over and above the role it has for climate mitigation. As I say, I'm not saying there's no role, we just shouldn't. I do see some scary articles which suggest we can do the whole thing by just improving soil carbon, which we can't. And I hope this graph shows it to you. So another example of just soils change, and they change fast. I'm sure many of you remember the whole acid rain story. It was real. We did have acid rain. We had extraordinary amounts of acid rain, which peaked in the 1970s. And that had caused massive acidification of our sensitive soils, many of them in the uplands. When we turned that off, when we insisted that filters needed to go in our power stations, catalytic converters, we really got on top of the acidic emissions because of fossil fuel burn. Look at the change in the average pH across the country. It went from 4.9 to 5.4. That is an enormous change. So that's no liming, no nothing, just what was coming from the sky had effectively acidified our soils on average by half a pH unit. That is massive in terms of crop production, habitat, what that did to our plants and wildlife. And so we tracked it, we know that happened. So when people say we can't track soil change, we absolutely can. We've done it for carbon, we've done it for acidity. So what can we do about this? Nature-based solutions. So I've recently completed a review for the EU mission, which there's so many management options. And how do you sort of, instead of just reeling them off one by one, we've kind of put them into 4 categories. So one is just the efficient use and reuse of organic matter, nutrients and water. So this is about making sure you've got good water use efficiency, good nutrient efficiency. Don't apply fertilizer that's just going to get wasted and go into your river systems. And the use and reuse of organic matter is more and more being talked about. If you keep removing biomass from soils and don't return any to it, by definition, you are going to run out of organic matter in your soils. So that can be challenging. We have got a kind of siloized agricultural system, but there are other organic products available. There's tree biomass, for example, that can, and compost waste from there. So circular systems of using organic compost is more and more being discussed. There is, of course, when it comes to waste, organic waste, there can be issues of contamination. Other countries are trying to deal with that, cleaning up that waste before they go on. Another one is reduced control of chemicals and integrated pest management. So if we contaminate our soils, it does in the end impact on the life in the soil, which we need to make soils healthy. So overall, reduced use of controlled chemicals and integrated pest management, which I'll come back to. There's management options, which basically simulate soil as a whole doesn't have steel cutting through it every year during tillage. So basically reduced tillage, trying to reduce traffic and animal compaction is clearly some of the issues that we need to think about when we're thinking about soil protection. Just think more about trying to be a bit kinder to our soils, not continually cut them up, not continually put heavy weight on them, not continually having hooves on them all the time, not trying to have isolated features and gateways and feeding stations. And then the final solution that is just not leaving soil bare, so that it's exposed to runoff and doesn't have the constant feeding of carbon and organic matter from the plants into the soil. So improve soil cover, for example, by cover crops, more diverse land systems, and use of landscape features like buffer strips and field margins as well. So I'm just going to go through what is the evidence that any of these work and how fast do they work and how much do they deliver. So first of all, thinking about erosion, runoff and infiltration rates. There's a lot of different management options here, from cover crops, vegetation barriers, reduced tillage, erosion caption systems, use of organic compost, and not putting maize on erodible soils. You can see an event here on the side, in the photograph. This kind of photograph just makes me want to cry. It takes over 100 years to build 1 centimetre of soil. So right there is 100 years of history and nature's actions just running down the road. It's non-renewable essentially. It's so slow to grow soil that this is just a tragedy happening. The good news is this is one of the fastest things to respond. If you do some of these actions, the evidence is that you get change, an improvement of between 25 and 90% in just a few years. That's massive. So there are options. The issues are it takes time, it takes energy, it takes advice, of course it does, but there's not that many trade-offs going on here. Keeping soil in the field, not in the river, is just a great thing, as is getting water to go into the soil, not rapidly running off the surface into the river. So to the more controversial area of increases in soil organic matter and carbon. Lots of proposals here about what works and what doesn't work, and there's just some examples. The rate of change, though, is quite small. It's a big box and it's a big amount of carbon. So to change it takes quite a lot of continual inputs. So the rate of change can be frankly 0 to less than 1% a year. Some of you will have heard of the 4 per mil initiative, which basically means 0.4% a year. That's all that means. And that's a year where people were saying initially in the 4 per mil initiative, if you just did that, we could wipe out the annual fossil fuel emissions. We can't. The numbers do not add up. But that said, just as I said before, it is still really, really worth doing because your soil health will be better if we do it. And also, in addition, greenhouse gas emissions can be bigger and faster, and I'm going to come back to that. Some of the issues that are reported, oh, sorry, I'll just go back, is how much carbon increase you get depends where you started from. So if you start with a depleted soil of soil carbon, you can get more into it. But the problem is it tends to very often be fastest and measurable in the surface soil, much, much slower in the lower surface, in the lower subsoils. It also saturates. In the end, you have a finite amount. It doesn't go on forever. And there's some management practices like no-till, which seem to have a highly variable effect, and in some cases have no effect, and can also increase bulk density, i.e. the compaction of soil in lower horizons. So these issues, it's not to say we shouldn't do them. Many of these managements have many other benefits, for example, erosion. So no-till has great benefits for erosion and biodiversity, but we do need to not oversell how much carbon we're going to stuff in the soil on an annual basis. Soil biodiversity, more and more interest. Of a quarter of biodiversity lives in the soil. Reduced tillage is one of the main things we can do, particularly for the earthworms. They do not like being chopped into every year. Organic systems and compost also seem to really increase the amount of fauna, in particular micro and macro fauna. Can be quite fast. One of our problems as scientists is we still don't agree terribly well what microbiology changes matter. So when you're looking at what we call the microbiome, the microbes, what are the beneficial functions and taxa and genes, and which ones aren't? And can we try and agree on that so everyone can try and measure it? You know, fungi we think are important. Some people see the fungi to bacteria ratios. We're getting there. So much work is being done in this area. Watch this space. Some people do already report on increases in beneficial biodiversity. I'm just trying to be honest that it's not quite as well agreed as some of the other metrics, but the approaches that we think improve, particularly the earthworms and the macrofauna, are pretty well known. So soil structure, I come back to, this is quite linked to erosion, but it is different. This is the state of the soil that's still in your field, if you like. And this is about improving traffic and animal management, thinking about organic compost to try and open up the soil, make them more air, more space for roots and for animals and microbes, more diversity and rotation. It does change quite slowly if you think of within a crop system or within a grassland system. If you introduce trees and agroforestry, you will get a far faster change. But of course, at that point, you're doing a mixed system and you've lost some of your land for food production. Bit of whether that overall can compensate and you get net same yield is dependent on how you do it. There can be some problems in lower soils, which we don't know very much about. We really wish we could have more data on what lower soils are doing, not just the topsoil. And as I said before, some practices can increase compaction in lower soils, so we need to be a bit careful about that. So for pollution and contaminants, we really don't want to stuff our soil because it's very hard to get contaminants out of soil once they're in there. But so we want reduced use of the control chemicals and overall integrated pest management. To the right, you can see a very nice ADAS report from 2020, all about what options are there for integrated pest management. And there you can see some of the things we're talking about that basically, so they're not directly for soil, but if they do this, it means less control chemicals are used, which overall is beneficial for soil health. The rate is quite variable. Frankly, we don't have a good collation of those numbers. And the issues are, it does take time for the land manager. There is a shortage of advice, and there's a perceived element of risk of following this, because you kind of have to hold your nerve when you see the breakout of a pest. Do you hold your faith? Do you think your biological predator is going to come in and sort it out? Is the cost of spraying the chemical going to offset the crop loss? It's a bit nerve-wracking for people. So I just want to finish off with sources of information for you if you're interested, and also the idea of soil test beds. So one of the things you saw right at the beginning is some of us, you can see the organizations at the bottom here, and we're slowly increasing in number, have created a new community hub for soil information. So there's some fantastic information out there, videos, films, guidance, data, maps. And if you're not in the know, you don't know where to find it. So we've brought them all together, and you can just Google uksoils.org and you will find it. We're not trying to replace anything out there. We're just trying to provide a central hub for it. We also do monthly soil talks where we take a testy issue that people are arguing about and invite 3 people to talk about it and then take questions. And we also hope we're going to be doing a community forum soon. And we've also supported the 30-minute Earthworm Hub, 30-minute earthworm search that's been run by Struck. So you can search in different ways. So this is for people who really just are getting into things, inspire me, teach me something, connect me to someone, just show me where something's already happening. Or you can say, I know I want to know about a lesson for schools, or I want to know where I can go and study soil, or I want to know soil community forums. You can go and have a look in that way. Or the third way is you really want an inspirational film about soil to show to a community network. So you can go and search by films and videos. You can search on guidance that DEFRA or others have put out. You can go and search for organizations that deal with soil. So there's 3 different ways that you can go and find what you need. And please, if you find information that you find useful and we don't have, there's a contact us place on the UK Soils website to just send it to us, and we put it up so that others can benefit from it. The final thing I want to talk about is where can I contact someone who's trialing new approaches for soil health? So where are best management practices being tested or being carried out, and who's developing new practices? And they're called, in the new parlance, lighthouses and living labs. And the ambition is to have research activities focusing around improving management practices, creating more joined up food systems, and break down urban and rural divides. These lighthouses and living labs should, we hope in time, have really good outreach and engagement programs. And if you like, the attractor is that the EU, which the UK has signed up to, is likely to be significant research funding around these sites that might be a mix of in a landscape area, say in lowland agriculture, around a city or around a town, a mix of farms and woodlands and community gardens, to try and learn together and try and create circular systems for soil and food and fiber and all these kind of things. So where can I find someone? Well, on the UK Soil website, we're asking people, if you think you've got a site that others people would benefit about knowing about, you can just contact us, list my site, give us a very few little bits of information. We put it here as a dot in the map. If someone clicks on the dot, they live in Aberdeen and they want to know, ooh, there's some up there by Aberdeen. You click on it, it gives you a very brief summary, and then a read more button where you then go to their website and hear all about it and think, ooh, I want to contact them and find out more that they're doing. So my challenge at the end is the EU mission is by 2030, 75% of soils are going to be healthy. They're going to do that by more support and advice, citizen engagement, research and monitoring. And they're also considering the idea of a soil passport, which guarantees no longer degradation for consumers or member states if it's got that stamp of soil passport. So it's kind of a branding thing. So it's not been approved yet, but this is coming. And I know we've got exited. But 50% of our trade is with the EU. And if the EU is doing this, do we want to get left behind? So there's my challenge to us. We probably just want to do it for ourselves, be global leaders in this is what I would hope, that our soils, we show, we believe in them, we understand their importance, and we want to improve them over time. So with that, I will ask for questions and hand back to you, Ethne. Thank you.
Thank you, Bridget. That was a really fascinating presentation and really interesting to hear about these examples of management techniques that can be used as nature-based solutions to support soil health. So to all our attendees, please do put any questions you have in the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. I'll get started on those in a second. I just have a quick question of my own, Bridget, if that's okay, which is just thinking about, so obviously you described a number of management examples. How do you think these can be incentivized in the UK so that people start using them more?
Yeah, well, each country, now we've come out of the EU, is thinking about the cap replacement. So it's ELMS, of course, in England. In Wales, it's Sustainable Farm Scheme. In Scotland, I can't remember what they're calling it. In Northern Ireland are doing something. So there's clearly that side of it, that public payments for public goods, we can do that. I do also think there might be an opportunity for improved regulation of just, there is a small number of people who ruin it for everyone, and really they shouldn't get public payments if they're doing it. And we just need to consider the Parliament, and this isn't me, the parliamentary inquiry themselves said, there were already something called Good Agricultural and Environmental Practices, the GECS, which said you shouldn't have loss of organic matter, you shouldn't have erosion, and yet very few people were ever pulled up about it. So if we're going to have those kind of regulations, we really should police them, and there should be some consequences, because so many people are doing the right thing. It's such a shame if then you go like I do down my road and see some really bad practice that puts farmers in a bad, gives them bad reputation. So I think we need carrot and a bit of stick.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you. I'll move on to some of our attendee questions. So one here is quite specific. It's what's your opinion on the use of compost teas for improving soil biodiversity?
Compost teas, I have no idea. Any organic matter in general is a good thing. But I haven't seen any studies specifically doing it. So I should be quite honest about that. In general, organic matter is good. In general, organic matter that has got nutrients and what have you. But yeah, I would give it a go. If you get any results, let me know.
Definitely, yeah, and get in touch with the UK Soils Network.
Yeah.
Are there carbon data sets for agroforestry?
Yes, there are. The agroforestry team, there's been quite a good few syntheses of these. And I had a look at them, and they've had experiments, they've looked at them. So with respect to soil carbon and trees, it can very much depend what soil type you're on, and fascinatingly, which tree species you're using. So when you plant some trees in some soils, you actually lose soil carbon, but some improve soil carbon. You do improve structure though very often, and if you use the prunings as a mulch, that's also an added benefit. So I'm trying to get everyone to not think too much just about carbon in itself, but it is quite variable. Quite a lot of these things you have to know. So I want to plant, this tree species in this soil type, what's the evidence? But there are syntheses out there. Just Google, you'll find some good ones.
Great, thank you. Is syntropic agriculture something that could be considered to improve soil health in the UK?
Okay, Laura's going to have to come up, and I'm ashamed I don't know what syntropic means. Could Laura just be released to tell me?
Yeah, let me see. Let me just give her 1 second. So Laura, if you unmute yourself, you should be able to explain your question.
Yes, hello, thank you. Can you hear me?
Oh, sorry, you're a bit quiet. I'm not sure if you can get a bit louder.
Can you hear me?
Give it a go. We'll listen very carefully.
Okay. Yes, Syntropic. I was just watching some videos recently about this new way of doing agriculture that were basically one attempts to regrow a forest, which is a form of agroforestry, basically, where the basics are just to try and mimic the ecosystem's processes. And a lot of it has to do basically with keeping the soil covered and just doing a lot of pruning and just leaving the pruning on the ground and not taking it away. And it's been used a lot in Brazil. It started to be used quite a lot, I think, in Brazil. And I thought that was something that I was wondering whether it was actually something that was starting in the UK as well, but possibly not, if you don't know about it.
Yeah, so agroforestry is practiced in many, many different ways, as is woodland. And the use of prunings as a mulch within the alley cropping and things like that is something that's kind of been tested and been done. It's one of the main benefits that people can say is you get kind of free organic matter by doing it. So I think it's something, I'm sorry that I'm not an expert on it, but of course, if you do it, you need to make sure that you're monitoring the effect on your overall production and things like that. But if you think of production forestry, leaving prunings on the ground is very often, you have to do it. When they go and brash, they have to do it because it's not economic to take it out. So the whole idea of what we do with the organic waste or resources that you take out of woodland is a really interesting one to do, because a lot of it is going into biofuels when actually a lot of it could be really well used to make organic compost for the farming system.
Great, thank you for that, Bridget, and thanks, Laura. That was really great. I'll move on to the next question, if that's all right. So we've got one attendee who said that there was a draft soils directive some years ago proposed by the EU, but this was cancelled partly due to the efforts of the UK. What do you think has changed this time round, and do you think this could take off now?
Yeah, that when I said there's a lack of policy pull, you can really trace it back to the failure of the soil directive. And you're right, it was us, the Germans and the Dutch, who led on not wanting to get it through. Why it's happened now is the EU Audit Commission itself has said that the lack of attention to soil is now a major issue. So the EU has kind of audited itself and said, we've got a problem, so you need to do something. I think there is still concern. So the EU mission isn't immediately saying we must have a directive now. We're saying we need to get people there so that people feel comfortable. They know what data, how to monitor it. They know practices to improve it. And then in time, everyone say, well, we know how we're doing this now, so it's all right to have a directive. So in time, we might get everyone there. But for now, it's through better advice, better payment schemes, better encouragement, better monitoring. And in time, everyone might want to say, yeah, let's get a level playing field and now have a directive. So, and of course, the UK is out of that now, so it's going to be interesting to see what we think of as well. But soil is in the 25-year plan, which is an England thing. In Wales, soil is one of its top level indicators of sustainable development in Wales. I live in Wales, I fess up. So I think it's just come up the political agenda, not just in the UK, Europe and globally.
Well, that's great to hear. Thank you. One quick question from an attendee who says that they run the university's Living Lab Biodiversity Monitoring Project, and they're keen to get soil level biodiversity and soil health skills brought in. Do you think this is something that they should approach UK Soils about?
Yeah, I mean, we don't fund anything, but if you go onto the UK Soils website and you just explore around it, look at methods there's a whole section on soil assessment methods that we've picked out and we think are good from around the web, you know, that different people have. There's commercial labs that you can, as I said, there's ways of sampling, as long as you follow it. RB209, if you don't know, is their way that farmers measure for fertilizer needs. So yeah, just go in, but if you go to the topic called soil assessment methods, you should find something that will be useful.
Great, thank you. How should we be considering soil health in new developments? We look at contamination and geotechnical properties, but not soil health. What do you think we can consider incorporating into the design and layout?
So no, I'm just trying to find that one. The design and layout of what? Are we talking construction soils now? Sorry, I'm not, and I'm struggling to find the question.
Oh, sorry, yeah, this one's in the chat box. New developments, I think from a land contamination perspective.
Oh, land contamination. So we are very, very keen in land contamination. So I very much focus on the agricultural sector because that's usually 99% of the interest. But the EU mission and DEFRA are very, very keen that we focus on the urban systems, brownfield sites, contaminated land. And there's phytoremediation options, use of organic compost. There's also more technical approaches. And particularly in construction sites, there's also a whole set of issues about how we get better compaction. Because if you've ever seen a building site, it's massive erosion and compaction very often. So, but we're starting from quite a low level. We don't even know where our contaminated sites are. You only have to measure it once you want to develop it. You then have to test it. So we're starting from quite a low point, but we absolutely must do it and know what it is and then remediate. You know, so there's phytoremediation, there's myco. So those of you who've read the Entangled book, there's some fabulous suggestions there about how fungi can be used to decontaminate soils. So I really think it's an area we should look into. The inquiry identified it and the EU mission also identified contaminated land, urban systems as equal issue, although farming usually gets most of the attention. Thanks.
Great, thank you. That was really useful. Going back to the more monitoring side of things, do you think monitoring soil protein is useful in terms of measuring active life and carbon in the soil?
Oh, I don't know. There's quite a lot of different metrics and indicators for soil life and activity. So there's respiration rates, metabolism rates, and no one's quite agreed on the best method. So it's one to put into the mix. I can see where you're coming from, but I'm also trying to think whether protein is a good metric for all the different types of soil life, animals, bacteria, fungi, what have you. And my brain isn't going fast enough now, but it's an interesting one. But it is a challenge. We have to sort out what are the agreed metrics we're going to do for not just the biodiversity, what's there, but how well they're doing, how functioning are they, what's the activity of them. And we've got some methods that have been around for a while, but they're not that useful across all different soil types. So we still need to do a bit more work there. But it's an idea, protein. Yeah.
Do you think there are trade-offs for crop yield when it comes to curbing the status quo in farming techniques in favour of those that minimise carbon removal from soil and other soil damage? And if so, where is the best place to find information on these trade-offs?
Yeah, so there might be a trade-off in any immediate year. What we think, though, over time is that you might get more resilience. So if you've got more organic matter in your soil, you might, in a drought year, retain more of your moisture. And there is a paper which was pointed out to me recently that's saying the more water needy crops are particularly better if they've got more organic matter. So your peaks might not be as high, but over a long time you might get more consistent yield. Now, there was the agricultural specialist group in Parliament put together various things like this, and there are some syntheses of it. But I'm not saying that there isn't over time, a healthier soil with more soil organic matter is going to be more sustainable for the next generation coming through. So even if there's a little less production now, in the long term, you've reduced your risks of erosion, you've got more resilience to drought. So in the longer term, even though immediate productivity has gone down, will be better, but it will depend on different crops and different systems.
Great, thank you. One attendee said that we don't monitor sediment loadings or soil loss in our rivers, and have questioned why this isn't done.
Yeah, no, you're right, we don't. Sediment losses are a bit of a mystery to all of us. We've got models that say how much is probably in, and we've got some numbers, and there is we do know, I think I gave a number that X% of rivers fail the Water Framework Directive because of sediment load. Why it's not done is, my guess is it's very stochastic. So it all tends to happen in a flash. And if you weren't there, and building a system that can capture it there and then is really quite hard. So yeah, it's just one of those things, but it is one of the bizarre things that if you ask our public bodies who are responsible for assessing in the environment, 80% of our money goes on water monitoring, and yet they still don't do very much on sediments and no soil monitoring. So water has taken the biggest chunk of our monitoring budget, and yet there's still gaps. But you know, perhaps some of the other things could be toned down to get budget to move across to soil.
Great, thank you. We'll try and fit in 2 more questions if that's okay, just in the short amount of time left. We've had so many coming through, so thank you for that. Have moisture trends been observed in the UK, and is moisture correlated to soil degradation?
Ooh, so yeah, there's now a network called Cosmos. Just it assesses soil moisture on a landscape scale, and there's a network now of over 40, 50 sites across the UK. It's relatively recent though. So the main way we can assess soil moisture is from the Met Office, has trends. And I think that the trends are basically as with the other rainfall trends, is that for some parts of the country, we've got drier summer and wetter winters as a general kind of horrible rule of thumb. So that's that. And what was the second part? Was there another part to that question? I can't remember now, Ethne, sorry.
Let me just check, sorry.
Something about salt.
Oh, and is moisture correlated to soil degradation?
Yes, so in respect, it is, because very often soil degradation is often linked to loss of organic matter, and organic matter is one of the primary ways with clays that soils hold moisture. Now, you could have soil degradation in another way that you've got a perfectly organic soil but stuffed full of contaminants, and it will still hold moisture. So it's not always a direct relationship, but for many of our systems, yes, there will be a loss, which brings me back to that resilience in drought years. Yeah.
Great. And final question, thank you. Do you think that actions to try and change farming practices via environmental land management schemes will be workable to achieve what is needed without looking at food systems and healthy eating more broadly?
The answer, no, I think they're spot on. Unless we change our overall ask of the farming system, create more circular systems where we don't have silo management going on and we mix animal and crop, and I would argue the woodland sectors, and unless we change our diets as well, we're just on an uphill struggle. Because, you know, the greenhouse gas emissions, as I said, you know, grow more grass, you've got more ruminants, by definition you've got more greenhouse gases. And so a whole systemic change is needed, and they're absolutely right, targeting one part of it, and we do need to think more widely. At some point for a talk though, you've got to kind of put a box around what you're talking about. But yeah, well spotted. Part of the EU mission is absolutely talking about the bioeconomy, not thinking of anything as waste. It's just a resource that's, it's like a weed in your garden. A weed is just a plant, there's the wrong plant in the wrong place. And a waste is actually just a resource that's in the wrong place. And we need to try and create systems to join these up better, and communities to join things up and better connect urban and rural communities. There's a whole connectivity issue that we need to get. And those living labs and lighthouses I was talking about, that's supposed to be where that might happen, where you would bring in the gardeners, the farmers, the citizens, the county council, the industry, the packing companies, to try and think of more circular ways of working together. But it's going to take a while, but we absolutely have to get started.
Excellent. Thank you, Bridget. And thank you again for such a great presentation and for answering all of those questions. Really appreciate you taking the time to come and do this for us today. I'm afraid that I can't ask any more questions. We're a little bit over time as it is. So thank you to everyone who put them in, and I'm really sorry if I didn't get to yours. But thank you all for logging in, and I hope you found this beneficial and informative. The next IES webinar will be held tomorrow, and this will be on applying the marine natural capital approach, learning from the marine pioneer. And this will be presented by Aisling Lannin. So thank you once again to everyone who attended, and thank you, Bridget. I hope you have a lovely rest of your day. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions, everyone. Bye-bye.